All right, everybody. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're going to be speaking with Kerrie Hoffman. Kerrie and I had met a couple of years ago through another colleague, and she has just a phenomenal take on managing the evolution of this digital transformation that we're going through, should be going through, are going through.
Hopefully
So
we're going through.
hopefully we're going to, I think we're going through it whether we like it or not.
That's
Just
true.
a couple of quick notes. Everyone is on mute to start, but please feel free to use the chat pane to enter any questions or comments you might have as we're having this discussion today. And feel free to take part in the, in the activities. This is just not a one-way street. We want to hear back from you as well. So let me give you a little bit of information on Kerrie. She is absolutely passionate about business transformation and getting as many companies as possible on their journey to the next age. Kerrie is a #1 best-selling business author and CEO of Hoffman Digital, an ecosystem of companies igniting the human experience at work. This includes strategic advisor at several modern technology companies, co-founder and partner at Get Digital Velocity, and digital advisor and certified business coach at Focal Point. In addition, Kerrie is a keynote speaker at industry venues and chairman of the board for Hashed in Malaysia. Kerrie, you're a pretty busy woman. Prior to her current sales role, Kerrie spent over 30 years at 3 corporations as an intrapreneur and business transformer, and that's why she's so passionate about this topic. She's worked in a variety of industries in several roles, including CIO, operations, supply chain, and sales. Kerrie's previous employers include Aurora Healthcare, Johnson & Johnson, and Johnson Controls. And when she's not focused on all of this digital transformation, she enjoys spending a lot of time with her family, getting out into nature and camping, and oftentimes reading up on technology in her downtime. So Kerrie, you have a fantastic resume, and so pleased that you're with us today.
Oh,
So I'm
thanks
going
so
to
much, Marge.
hand it over to you. And again, I'll be watching the Q&A pane and the chat pane. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them up in the chat pane and we can address them. And this is going to be an interactive conversation as we go through it.
Yeah, for sure. And we'd love to address questions from the viewers. So please take us up on that. So hey, Marge, for 2 decades now, we've been living in this time of transition and great transformation, right? And it's an amazing time, really, with business continuing to accelerate. For many in the last 2 decades, I think especially this year, it doesn't always seem like better times. Our listeners may be finding what worked consistently in the past is not working as well now. And pandemic aside, there are reasons for the increasing speed of business and this decreasing effectiveness if you haven't managed through the evolution. So the world has actually exited the industrial age and entered the next age. And not all businesses have made that shift. So, what I want to do is I first want to explore some evolutionary transitions because I think this gives context to what's happening today. So, let's walk through the history of some other transformations. So, everyone's familiar, right, with these eras and ages and revolutions. What's interesting is there are 3 similar characteristics when moving from one to the next. First, there was a trigger which kicked off each one. Next, the way work is conducted in each one is completely different. And third, there is a significant acceleration of business with each age. So, as an example, the trigger that set off the agricultural age was stationary farming and primitive irrigation. This was a big change where people started to settle in villages and cities. They began selling a focused area of goods and services, and then they bought everything else they needed from other sole proprietors. In the Industrial Revolution, we moved from single proprietors working with their hands to large organized departments working with machines. So it was this automation of work with machines that was the trigger. Now, a lot of people think of this, right, as the printing press or the steam engine, but the reality is the first kind of machines that set off the industrial age were spinning machines for making textiles. This happened around the year 1760 in Europe. This is where corporations were eventually born, right? This is business as we've known it for decades. And it's another significant transformation with a lot more complexity and definitely an increase of speed of business, right? That's been a completely different world in the Industrial Revolution is the speed of business. In the next stage, we're fundamentally changing everything about the way we're used to working in the industrial age. The next age was triggered by an exponential growth in technology. Around the year 2000, new technology companies like Salesforce started popping up, and they were using the exponential technologies to build new, much more efficient technology platforms. So now, 2 decades into the move to the next stage, a major wrench gets thrown in with into the mix with COVID-19. So I think it's important to look at the impact of that.
Kerrie, when we look at it that way, it's just amazing how much has happened and this cusp that we're on right now in all of our businesses. And some days I think we feel like, what's going on? But we really are on this huge transition. Really,
Yeah.
huge.
Well, and I know like a lot of people have felt this in their business with the pandemic, but the reality is it did start back in the year 2000
Yeah.
when these new technology companies started popping up. And that's the thing that's interesting. And one of the interesting aspects for me was watching what was happening in the pandemic. I think there's a lot of silver linings to it.
Yes.
A company who was highly digital back in February found it a lot easier to pivot
Yeah.
with everything happening with COVID. And actually, companies who had already made this change and were fully in the next stage, they actually saw revenue growth with the pandemic. Their first quarter, second quarter was revenue growth. A lot of their competitors who hadn't made the change were not taking up any market share, and so they gained market share, which is
Right.
a huge impact of the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when the new companies started popping up, the digital natives, if you will, they were leveraging that trigger, the exponential growth in technology. We call them digital natives because they actually started their companies in a new way of working. And they specifically started as a digital company. And you can see these depicted as the green dots on this slide. So, what comes to mind, right? Companies like Salesforce, Zoom, Uber, Lyft. These are all companies that were digital natives. And they actually disrupted some of the traditional companies, right? 2007 is the year that the exponential technology really became mainstream and digital natives started to accelerate significantly. This is also when traditional companies from the industrial age started to adopt a digital way of doing business. Well,
Mhm.
at least some of them did, right? And the adoption has been slow. It's been slower in the western part of the world than the eastern part of the world. And while some traditional companies were transforming, other traditional companies were being disrupted by digital natives and disappearing altogether. So I'm sure, Marge, you can think of some of these examples, right?
Oh my God.
Blockbuster getting disrupted by Netflix,
Right.
Kodak getting disrupted by digital photography, taxis by Uber and Lyft, right?
Yeah. It's just been amazing. Thinking differently, thinking so differently. And that's, I think, accelerating right now. And I think COVID's been part of even accelerating that faster.
Yeah, it's another silver lining, right? It's gotten people to think differently, for sure. I think one of the interesting thing is everybody uses the example of Kodak, right? Oh, Kodak got disrupted by digital photography, but there's more to that story. Kodak actually developed the technology for digital photography, but they couldn't imagine disrupting their film business because it was such a cash cow. And so they didn't make the switch.
Yeah.
They had all the capability, but they didn't do it. So there's this mindset thing that happens or
Right.
doesn't happen.
Or it doesn't happen, right? No, we're going to
right?
stick with what we know because it's comfortable, right? And
Yeah.
oh, you've got to keep looking forward, especially now. I mean, since 2000, so many things have changed, and how quickly businesses change. Even our business, my little business, right? We started
Yep.
out doing cold call prospecting for industrial and manufacturing companies. Well, if we were still doing that today, only we wouldn't be in business. We had to incorporate the digital aspect of marketing and lead generation, and even now we're looking towards adding on some additional services. And what are the things going to be that we're going to have available 5, 10 years from now? We don't even know. But we have to keep looking to make sure that we're staying ahead of where the industry is and what our clients are going to need.
Oh, and that's really key, Marge, what you just said, that you have to continue to look ahead.
Yeah.
It's about continuously looking at how your business needs to adapt. It's about continuous learning. So
Hmm.
you can learn about the new ways, the possibilities of what you can do. It's so important. So when that pandemic hit, it created the most widespread global disruption in modern history, right?
Hmm.
Huge disruption. On the bright side, it actually fueled technology adoption. So if you think about it, I've never seen so many companies all around the world pivoting so quickly to work remotely, right? Everyone did it in 2 weeks or less. I talked to a number of CIOs from large companies who said, if we would have planned that as a project, we would have planned a 6 to 12 month project at least, right?
Hmm.
And we were able to do it. This is what they say, we were able to do it in 2 weeks. The technology was ready, the people were capable, and it was so surprising. And the thing to remember is take that to the next level. It's not just work from home that you can pivot on. Like you talked about with your business, you figured out ways to pivot, right? So you
Hmm.
took it way beyond just working from home,
Absolutely. And that's just the way business is now, and
right?
all businesses, and large or small. Yesterday I happened to be on a conference call, and the president and COO of Goldman Sachs was speaking, and we were asking him questions, and one of the things that he said was he believes it will be key to future businesses to make sure that they are implanting digital technology and technology into their companies. He said, if small businesses do not do this, what will happen is that only the large companies will have the ability to have technology and the smaller companies won't. And he said, no matter what it's going to cost, you have to look at it and you have to embrace it, because if you don't incorporate technology, you will not be in the business moving forward. And I had no idea he was going to say that 24 hours prior to this webinar, but that's what he said. I
Which
was
I
like,
love. I
oh,
absolutely
okay.
love, right? Because it's so true. And the thing is that, in the industrial age, small and mid-sized businesses, had the excuse really. And it was a real thing that technology costs millions of dollars.
Right.
And so only large companies could afford it. That has completely changed.
Yes.
And it started changing in the year 2000. And I said it became mainstream in 2007 because this is when the cost of technology and the architecture of technology changed. The architecture changed, which actually enabled the cost to go down. So technology that used to cost millions of dollars now is available to any business. It's still a cost, but it isn't a showstopper like it was in the industrial age. And that's so important. So companies that are pivoting the quickest in all of this are creating not only work from home, they're creating entirely new and highly modified supply chains to keep the economy flowing, right? To keep the business going and actually thrive. So I think all at once we kind of see companies, and in the pandemic, like in February, March, we saw companies on a dichotomy of paths, really. They either halted and were in decline or they were quickly transforming.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have to be both paths because there's solid ways to increase adoption of digital business and adoption of that digital technology. I think the question is, though, are we keeping up with the exponential growth in technology?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So
Something
what do
new
you
every
think?
day.
Are we keeping up? Well, not exactly. We're not exactly keeping up. So this is a graph from a book by Thomas Friedman. He wrote the book, The World is Flat. A lot of people know that book. Thomas Friedman also wrote the book, Thank You for Being Late. And early on in this book, he shows a chart by Eric Teller. The chart shows the technology is already on the exponential part of its curve, but human adaptability is not. In fact, it's fallen behind and it's caused a gap. So I think it's more important now than ever for companies to adopt the transformation needed to keep their businesses relevant, growing, and profitable, right? We've already been talking about that. In the current global situation, it's definitely been a kick in the butt for companies to increase adoption. So I actually think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is it actually pushed everybody into the next stage. Whether they wanted to or not, it pushed you
Exactly.
in, right?
Kind of got that big old boot, go,
Yeah.
you're here.
Yeah. And now I've been living and preaching and doing business transformations for decades, enabled by technology. And it's been really exciting for me with exponential technology because it's so much easier to adopt. But it was even a kick in the butt for me in my businesses, right?
Sure.
I've been
Yeah.
teaching these concepts for decades.
Yeah.
So the silver lining is we're already seeing the human adaptability curve take an upswing. So COVID-19 has actually caused this upswing. The key though is that you have to actually go beyond embracing work at home and you need to adopt more technologies, just like you heard on the Goldman Sachs call yesterday.
Yeah.
So the ways to close the gap are on the left-hand side of this chart. And we're going to touch on most of these today, not all of them, but most of them, somewhat in the order you see them on the chart. So the first one is not technology. The first one is about adopting a digitally expanded mindset. So the biggest blocker to making this transformation is mindset.
Mhm.
So there's 5 aspects. The first aspect of a digitally expanded mindset is that you see the possibilities in the digital era. You have to believe that digital is within reach as a prerequisite to taking any action. So this really should permeate throughout your behaviors and your attitudes. Then you have to take the next bold step to create a vision for where you want to take your business in the next age. Because many small and mid sized businesses have employees, and the leader has to create a vision for where they want to take the business and get a critical mass of their employees to be believers, right? That this is possible.
Mhm.
Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely. Kerrie, it brings me back years ago. Somebody created this vision for me, and he said, as a leader, you have gone down into the dark trench and you're coming up the other side and you're at the top of the hill. And when you're at the top of the hill, everybody behind you is in the trench and you're
Yep.
screaming, come on up. It's bright and sunny up here. But when you're finally at that point of enlightenment or success, everyone else is still down in the trench and you got to keep lifting them up so that they can get to the level that you're at. And as leaders, that's something we really have to think about. We've got to embrace what we see for the future, and then we've got to help our folks along, because sometimes this whole thought of transition and change, it's hard for human nature. Humans
It
struggle
is.
with
It's
change, and there's been
right.
great change.
It's really hard for people. And I love that you brought this up because that's the classic change curve, right? And you have to manage yourself through the change curve. The biggest mistake that leaders make is they communicate from where they are on the change curve, which they've already been through the valley of despair, and they communicate from, oh, isn't this great? And the people they're communicating to are still on the other side of the valley.
Yes,
Like, what are they talking about? They're crazy.
not great.
Well, let's look at the second aspect. The second aspect of a digitally expanded mindset is believing in the power of modern technology. Okay, you have to believe in the power of modern technology. Digital business is enabled by modern technology. So what does that mean? What's modern versus traditional? Well, modern technology can systematize, scale, and speed up every interaction in your business. Okay, the key is you don't have to understand the guts of how it's architected differently. You just have to understand that it can be implemented in days and weeks. And it's so elegantly designed that it's usually intuitive to learn. right? So that contrasts with traditional technology, which typically can take quarters and years to implement. It's complex and it's slow, and it often takes training to understand how to use it.
Mhm.
So you can definitely just look at that difference in time to implement to understand what's traditional and what's modern.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's jump right to the third aspect of a digitally expanded mindset, which is anchored in an abundance mentality. So an abundance mentality is collaborative, it's open, it's appreciative, it's trusting. And when you have an abundance mentality, you believe there's more than enough for everyone, right? More than enough. There's enough customers, there's enough revenue, there's enough talent. You even turn to competitors as partners. Okay, so this is different because the industrial age was like crush the competition, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And this next stage is like, how do we collaborate to make sure that we're keeping up with the pace of business and we're solving customers' issues? It's a bit different.
Absolutely. Well, even looking at the marketing world right now, and when I see a job description for a marketing person, I think, oh, Lord in heaven, the Lord and his 12 disciples couldn't do all of that. You can't be a specialist in SEO and a specialist in uh, paid advertising and a specialist in blogging and a specialist in content creation. And you think about all of the specialties, and I'm seeing it more and more in the marketing space with agencies who years ago would not talk to one another. Well, we're a marketing agency. Oh, they're a marketing. Well, they're coming together to amass
Yeah.
their special areas and really be able to provide a wealth of solutions for customers so they don't have to have four different agencies working on different things. And I see that becoming a very common space in our neck of the woods for sure.
Yeah, yes. And I think it's a common space all around. So you really, if you really step back from, your space and take a look at it, you can see that. You can see
Yes.
competitors, you can see really different kinds of partnerships with universities, and
Yes.
there really is an abundance out there. It's an exciting aspect, it really. But we don't always feel the abundance coming our way, do we? Well,
No.
there's also a lot of ambiguity due to the change
Mhm.
which needs to take place. And it can be, well, and really abundance can be a little bit scary too,
It
right? Because
can.
oh my God,
Sure.
there's so much out there. So
Right.
the fourth aspect of a digitally expanded mindset is comfort with ambiguity.
Mm.
Comfort with ambiguity is necessary because there's an enormous amount of ambiguity in any transformation. So the current level of transformation is both exciting and sometimes scary for our employees and our talent pools. So it's important to have that strong vision to keep your employees motivated and oriented in the direction that you want to go. So
Yeah.
let's move right to the fifth aspect. So the fifth aspect of a digitally expanded mindset focuses on a growth outlook. This is one of my favorites because I'm like the ultimate optimist. So, having a growth optimist in the digital age means that you're an explorer. You
Mm.
have agility, you adjust to change, you thrive in diversity, and you actually seek resources and answers. So, if an obstacle is thrown up, you're like, go out and research it. I love the aspect of Google, right? Just Google it. We always say that, but it's true. Like, whatever idea I have, I don't think I've ever had an idea where I Google it and then it's not there. Like someone's already done it. So you don't have to start from ground zero on your ideas. You can go and research it and look for resources and partners who have already done it so that you can get there faster, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is so much information available to us. Just being inquisitive and looking out there and reading. And as you said, Googling, there are so many ideas, almost too many sometimes, but
Yep.
you really do save a lot of time. You're like, nope, that's exactly what I was thinking. And here's the roadmap, and this is how I can do it. So it's wonderful. And it's
And
really wonderful.
well, and saving that time is so important, right? Because we have to keep up with that speed of business. So
Absolutely.
never think you have
Absolutely.
to start from scratch on anything. I just like you don't. There's always something out there to help accelerate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just reading an article this week, and it was as a result of the Inbound conference last week that, some of the things that people are thriving on and they're searching for is templates, easy things that you can quickly use. And, they say, get them up on LinkedIn. If you have some knowledge that saves you time, share it with everybody else. And,
Yeah.
and it's just that mentality of let's share what we know, let's be collaborative together. And, that's the way we're going to start to do business now. And it is really funny. It's much different than the way we did.
That's a huge part of the abundance mentality is the sharing
Yes.
instead of the competing.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
love it.
Much better. I like that much better.
So do I. So do I. So I mentioned adopting, right? These 5 aspects of a digitally expanded mindset is a prerequisite to moving into the next stage. But how do we actually move into a digital flow of business, right? How do we take that mindset and apply it? Well, it starts with something that I like to call extreme customer centricity. So, in the next age that we find ourselves in, it's necessary for companies to unlock and start practicing extreme customer centricity. So, this means everyone in the company has a touch point with a customer, even if there's thousands of employees in your company. People understand the customer's issues deeply and they can anticipate customer needs, right? I think a classic example is Apple, right? No one said I needed, the iPod. Nobody said I needed a phone that could do all these things, right? They anticipated
Mhm.
and actually created the market. Well, a fully digital business can then respond quickly to solve the customer's issues, to fulfill the needs, and exceed the customer expectations. This goes way beyond just the focus on the customer that was in the industrial age. The customer and the company actually obtain a very high level of partnership, and the customer starts to feel like they're part of the company, that they can influence the company. So it's a whole like next level of customer focus, and that's why we call it
Amazing.
extreme customer centricity.
That's amazing. But Kerrie, to that point, it makes a lot of sense. The world we live in right now is very noisy. We read a statistic back in 1970, people were getting anywhere between 600 to 1,200 messages per day. That number in 2020 is between 6 to 10,000 messages per day.
It's
And
crazy.
you can't shout any louder than the competition. It's a noisy world. And the focus now is really on keeping those customers that you have, delighting them, and they're going to go out and promote you. And that's where your biggest source is going to come from. You're going to have customers who become promoters. So in the B2C world, it's that good review on Google. In the B2B world, it's a colleague taking another colleague by the hand and saying, hey, I would like you to meet Kerrie. I really believe she can help you with this. And we see that happen here at Acadia. Clients will bring somebody else in and say, hey, I'd like you to meet Jim. So that extreme customer centricity is absolutely the wave of the future. You've
Yeah,
got
for
to get those
sure.
customers just loving you and feeling part of your organization.
Well, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but it's actually how we met as well.
This is
Be-
true. Yeah.
right? Because I ended up meeting a technology company through a series of people that know me and said, "Oh, to this technology company, you should talk to Kerrie." And and then I checked and made sure like this just wasn't some kind of a cold call, right? With the person who referred, "Oh, do you really know this company?" "Oh, yeah, I do." "Oh, okay." And so and we ended up eventually meeting through this series of chains of referrals. That's
Right.
how we met. So it's a huge way of doing business
It
today.
is. And a lot of that was surrounding customer centricity,
It
wasn't it?
was.
It
It
was
was.
very fun. It really was. It's amazing how customers love their vendors. I mean, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, the topic through which we met was a customer advisory board. So,
Oh, those are cool. If you want to know anything about customer advisory boards, just text me or
oh yeah,
shoot me a note in the chat pane. I've got
absolutely. Marge is like an expert in this area for sure.
I love them. I love them.
Well, to fully unlock extreme customer centricity, it requires new ways of working. And those are represented by the 3 keys to achieving digital velocity, which you can see on the slide. So the first one's around talent. There is an abundance of talent out there if you're using alternate sources of talent. So this can include crowdsourcing, freelancers, deep partnerships, not just with other companies, but with suppliers, with universities, even partnerships with your customer and your competitor, as a few examples. I think it's also important to augment your internal talent with things like artificial intelligence or AI. Now, AI and robotic process engineering and cognitive process automation, these things have gotten some bad raps in terms of, oh my God, we're going to replace everybody with robots or artificial intelligence. The reality is we need to replace the mundane tasks that we're doing to free up our time to do other things. So I like to think of artificial intelligence as augmenting our talent.
I like that. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will think, oh my God, like, how do I implement artificial intelligence? And, for most small businesses and medium sized businesses and even large businesses, you don't actually implement artificial intelligence necessarily. There's a lot of platforms out there that already have it built in. So, say I mentioned Salesforce earlier, they have artificial intelligence built into their platform.
Mhm.
If you use the mapping app Waze has artificial intelligence built into it. Amazon, I'm sure by the revenue numbers I just saw, everyone's ordering off of Amazon. They have artificial intelligence built into that platform, and that's how it recommends other things for you to buy that are probably things you might want to buy. So it's built in. And so there's a lot of processes and mundane things that we do that can be automated. The example that I'll give for myself, when I left the corporate world, which I had been in over 30 years, and started my own business, which I started the coaching business first, I was literally being driven crazy by calendaring. This is a really simple thing, but I would send like someone 3 options, and then they'd send me back, oh, I can't do those. And there's this back and forth. And then I started to get really busy. And so I'd send the same people the same options, and then they'd pick the same one, right? And I was like ready to lose it. But but there's calendar apps like Calendly or Time Trade, or there's just all kinds of them out there. It doesn't matter which one it is, but I send you a calendar link, you pick a time, and it sends us both an invite.
Right.
I don't have
Right.
to do anything.
No,
It's
I love that.
automatic, right? Simple example. So let's talk about the second key. So digital businesses next have very agile and flexible operations. They're often organized around customer micro segments, and they work in small cross-functional teams. They're agile and flexible enough to solve customers' issues quickly. And this is true even if it means changing or creating new products and services or even new business models. So, for a large company, they're moving from being in these functional departments to now primarily being in cross-functional teams where their department is secondary. It's a huge change in the way you operate. Now, for a small business, you're already probably a small cross-functional team, right? Focused on the customer. So for small businesses, it hasn't been as much of a change. So here's the cool thing about that. Because of modern technology and our ability to automate a lot of things as small and mid-sized businesses, now more than ever, small and mid-sized businesses can work with larger businesses. So in my second business, Get Digital Velocity, we work with huge corporations. We have a very digital business model. We're small, but we have a whole list of partners that we utilize. And so we can scale up for a big client very quickly. And we can assist those large companies in how to accelerate and do their digital transformations. We can do this because it's much easier to scale up and down when you're a digital company and you have a digital business model.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's, I think, another thing that we're seeing as a result of COVID. All of a sudden, people are saying, do I really need all that office space? It seems as though everybody went from home. So everybody's fine at home and it's working, so I can have half the space. Maybe I only need a conference room and 2 offices. Everybody's going to come in every other week, a couple days, whatever it might be. So again, that whole transformation, that whole idea of digital operations and being a digital company is really having an impact in other areas. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. I bet we're going to see a lot more co-share space. We're going to see different ways of having a office.
Yes,
Because I think people will
absolutely.
want to get out of their den eventually, let's face it.
Yes.
I'm
I
fortunate
know,
enough I can come to the office, but I do really believe that it's not going to be the same. It's
right.
going to be different. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting again to see how that plays out.
Totally, totally true. And you can see the acceleration of business really continuing with this as well, right? Because
Yes.
now I'm not traveling from appointment to appointment to appointment. So you can fit more in. You can service your client better than you
Yes.
could before. So it's interesting. I think most executives I talk to in big companies too, they are saying that, wow, I'm surprised my people are even more productive for the most part. It's not
Hmm.
always true, but for the most part,
Yeah.
people have been pleasantly survived, that productivity has gone up and not down.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, to accomplish these first 2 points, the talent capacity planning and the digital operations, you have to adopt exponential technology and you have to do it on a regular basis. And you have to remember, you can implement these technologies in days and weeks, right? And that contrasts with traditional business, and traditional technology, which takes quarters and years to implement the new technology. So, I before we jump and see if there's any questions, I just want to kind of leave with a final thought, at least the slide pieces. Prior to the 2020 global pandemic, it was really easy to argue that not all businesses can become or need to become fully digital, right? I had a lot of people debate with me, well, my company, we're not digital, or some people would even say, well, digital marketing. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about that, right? I'm
Right.
talking about the broader digital business. Digital marketing is just part of it. The reality is, the more digital a company was in February of 2020, the easier it was for them to pivot in March of this year. Not only to switch to work 100% from home in days or a couple of weeks, but also to pivot on their products and their services to keep the revenue flowing and grow the top line revenue during quarter 1. The more digital you were, the more likely you grew your top line revenue in quarter 1 of 2020 over quarter 1 of the previous year.
That's amazing when you think about it. That really is amazing. It's
Yeah.
here to stay, guys. I mean, we've got to really think about it. And I put up in the chat pane, how are your companies keeping up? Is there anything, and I'd love you guys to start to throw it in, is there anything that you saw or you didn't see when you went through this transition to working from home? How was it for you? Was it something that was easy? Did your company embrace this readily? Were you already set up online? I know for us, we've been using Zoom for a couple of years now. So
Right.
it was relatively easy for us. I'm also laughing, Kerrie, because when you went back to like 2000 and all, that's just about the time that I was starting to hire contractors and consultants to help me. And I started a virtual business literally from my kitchen table. And I remember the day that I found Google Docs. Oh
Uh-huh.
my, we could all put information in the cloud, and it was like it solved a lot of the challenges we had because we were sitting across the country. We weren't even sitting in the same city.
Yeah, and you could
And it
collaborate on the same document at the same time, right?
that was like unbelievable. We thought we died and went to heaven. So we've always kind of had that mindset, that digital mindset from the early days. And it really did help us and it helped our clients. I would have clients call and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with how to use a certain technology, Zoom,
Mhm.
something. And I'd say, practice with me. Just get,
Yeah.
they didn't want to
Yeah.
practice. I'm like, just let's get on a Zoom call together and we'll practice and we'll share the slides. And, we pivoted to help a lot of our manufacturing clients who had trade shows
Mhm.
go away overnight. So
Yeah.
what are we going to do now? Well, we kind of pivoted and we started to do webinars. What were you going to talk about at the trade show? New piece of machinery, a new piece of equipment. Well, let's get out there on the plant floor. Let's have a real time video of the piece of equipment and let's show it to them. We'll have a virtual trade show, a virtual
Right.
booth, so to speak. So there's lots of different things that companies have done to really pivot and embrace this, and it's here to stay. It really
Yeah,
is.
for sure, for sure. So, well, like you, we started as a very virtual business. Even my coaching business originally, I was like, oh, I'm going to coach people in my geographical area, but the reality was all my referrals were from all over because I worked in global roles for decades, and
Yeah.
so the people that know me are all over. And so I was virtual from the start, like you said. I love your example of the digital trade booth because. Or the virtual trade, booth in a trade show, because now there actually have been industrial trade shows where they're virtual. And of course, they have all the speakers and everything. That's easy. But they also have breakout rooms where the breakout rooms are trade show booths.
Yeah.
And people can sign up to go and speak directly to the folks in that breakout room. The cool thing about that is, unlike the trade floor show where everyone's just walking around and people are, grabbing the tchotchkes and talking to you, but they're really not interested in your product. On the
Right.
virtual one, they actually want to know about your product.
Yes.
Right?
You have the leads coming into your booth. This is my world. The leads coming into your booth are very qualified because they're stopping in
Yes.
for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, which is another acceleration of business because now you're not waiting through 80%, which aren't really qualified leads, and 20% that are. Now,
Exactly.
maybe you're seeing less people in your virtual booth, but they're all the qualified leads.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things that I like to reference from like March of this year is some examples, right? So a great example of pivoting or not pivoting, or I would say the great example of the dichotomy of paths, right? Either you're dying or you're growing, is the restaurant business, and
Mm.
specifically restaurants who were either fine dining or dine in only, not even necessarily fine dining, right? But they were dine in only. They didn't do carry out, um, they didn't do delivery, right? And all of a sudden their business stops completely unless they pivot. So I had read an article about a restaurant in New York City where the owner was tweeting, "We're doomed, we're going to go bankrupt because we can't serve anyone." And then there was a restaurant in Seattle, also dine in only, that said, "Wow, we need to pivot because people still need to eat," right? And a lot of people don't cook. So what they did was they took their hostesses and had them be order takers. So you could call in your order on the phone because they didn't have anything set up as in terms of ordering online or ordering on an app. Their servers became the people that packed the food. The kitchen pivoted and created like maybe 5 different meal packs or kinds of meals instead of a full menu. And the revenue that they pulled in March of 2020 was 3 times their revenue in March of 2019.
Isn't that wonderful?
There's
Yeah.
nothing different between the business model of those two restaurants. The one that said we're doomed and closed, and the one that said let's pivot and figure this out.
Hmm.
So I
And
love that example.
there's so much of that going on right now. There are now ghost kitchens. I don't know if you guys have seen ghost kitchens or heard about them, but basically, uh, they're chefs and people who are making wonderful meals. They're never going to have a dine in. They're just now going to do curbside pickup or delivery or what have you. And they're getting very collaborative and very creative and
Hmm.
coming up with just really neat ways to, be able to get your food and eat well and eat healthy, and they're called ghost kitchens because they will never have a restaurant where you're going to go sit. They're just going to be virtual.
Yeah, it's really changing the way that business real estate is
Yes,
functioning, right?
very much so.
It's interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting. I love curbside, I have to say. I'm like,
Isn't it neat? I have
yeah,
to say I never thought much about it until this all happened. And now
right.
I'll think to myself, okay, it's around 4:30 or so in the office, and I'm going to be here till about 6. What can I order? You go on, you order, you say I'll pick it up at 6:15, drive by on the way home, and there it is. It's like that's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, and this is another, I bring up the restaurants because it's easy to relate to, right?
Yeah.
So the curbside's interesting because you can see who's pivoting the fastest on the
Hmm.
curbside, right?
Hmm.
So a restaurant like Panera was one of the first on curbside to have curbside as an option on the app. They already had a great app before this, okay?
Right.
But you could do the pickup or dine in, and you could put your table number in if you were sitting in there. That's what was existing before. When they added curbside, now you can check curbside. And when you pull up on the app, you say, I'm here. There's a button that says, I'm here. And then they just come out and find your car because you can enter your car in there as well. So that's like the most advanced, right? They went all the way to the technology piece of it and said, let's add curbside as a choice and let's add a button that says I'm here. And it's very efficient for them. They don't have to take the extra phone calls to do it.
Exactly. And again, what makes it easier for the customer? That's what we have to keep thinking. What makes it easy for the customer, and what can we do to make it easy for them to do business with us?
Right, exactly.
So we are at about 2:17, and I would love to open it up to questions. If anybody has a question for Kerrie or myself, go ahead and throw it into the chat pane, and then I think we can take you off mute as well. So would love to get some Q&A in here.
Absolutely.
So Kerrie, one question I had for you too, what was one of the more successful digital transformations that you experienced in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the most successful ones that I experienced was at a very large company. I was the CIO of a business unit that did $15 billion in revenue. They had grown up over time through acquisition, and it had been a decade of really not investing much in IT, and even having low investments in products at the time. And we were very difficult to do business with. So most of the customers were large customers. It was a company that did HVAC equipment and building automation systems. And our large customers would order products from multiple different divisions within our business unit. And they would end up with multiple orders, multiple invoices, multiple call centers to call to find out where their product was at. And this was because we had 32 brands of ERP and hundreds of instances.
Yeah.
And so the traditional way to fix that is to go to one instance of ERP, right?
Right.
But this was 2014, and it's like the president of the company wanted it fixed in 1 year. So anyone who's worked for a large company knows you can't do an ERP implementation in a year.
Yeah.
So we actually put well, first we led with the customer, right, with customer centricity, and said, well, the customer can't wait 5 years to fix this issue either. So we came up with the business goal of getting to single order, single invoice. And then we had to get creative behind the scenes because we were still going to have all these ERP systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we put a digital data layer over the top. We built a cloud layer on top of that. And we actually created a single order, single invoice that could talk back to all the different legacy systems. And it wasn't your typical integration. It was very virtualized and abstracted, which are two of the components of modern technology from an architecture perspective. So we were supposed to do it in a year. We didn't get funded for the first 6 months, but we ended up doing it in 18 months, and it was amazing.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
actually the first time in the IT piece of my career that the IT department within that part of the company started to be faster than the business. It was a lot of fun. So that's probably the biggest transformation that I can talk about.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
was there a reason why it was so successful? Was it the people? Was it the leadership? Was there some factors involved that
Oh
made it
my
go
gosh.
so well?
So the vision and then the mindset and the change management around changing people's mindset was
Okay.
huge. We set very big goals. Like instead of delivering things in quarters and years, we were going to deliver in days and weeks.
Wow.
We actually got down to delivering everything in 90 days or less,
Wow.
which is kind of unheard of with technology in a big company. But there was a lot of change management, a lot of
Yeah.
that mindset, right? Those 5 aspects of a digital mindset that
Mhm.
comes from the experience of what we needed to do. And then there was a lot of help that we gave people in training.
Right.
So it was both like the school of hard knocks, but so much support that you don't have an excuse. So as an example, we told everyone that we're going to move from a waterfall way of doing projects to an agile way. It's just
Mhm.
2 methodologies. They're vastly different.
Mhm.
And at one point I just said, that's it. Every project, I don't care what you say about the project, every project has to be agile. I'm throwing you all in the agile water. There's no more waterfall. There's no
Right.
more hybrid agile, which is what happened. This
Yes.
concept of hybrid agile doesn't exist. It doesn't work. And but what we said is, I'm throwing you all in the water. It's sink or swim. But I'm throwing you so many life rafts and life preservers and equipment to protect yourself through training and change management that you are going to be able to do this,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. And that's the ticket. So I think for smaller organizations that are looking to make these types of changes, you really have to think through how you're going to manage it. You have to think through that mindset and how to bring people through change management, because there is this resistance to want to do things. And COVID has really pushed us into some waters that maybe we're not comfortable with. And to your point, if we have our team who's not comfortable right now with these waters, we really have to throw them the life rafts.
Oh, we
What does that
do.
mean to your company? I think these are things that you really need to be thinking about today. And then continuing to say, now that we have jumped into the water, let's not get out. We're in. Let's keep making things happen and making things change, because we're in the pool now. We might as well keep swimming.
Oh, exactly. And remember, not all the life rafts and life preservers and all those things have to be created by you yourself.
Right.
It's that partnership, right? Partnering with other companies, partnering with some technology providers. The most modern technology platforms out there have video training, right?
Yes.
You can go to their site before you choose, and you can see all these video trainings. I think the best video trainings are the ones that are 2 to 5 minutes
Yep.
at the most, right? That show you how to do that one task that you need to do.
Correct. And the next time you need to figure out the next one, you go to that other 2-minute video. I'm with you. I'm not going to sit
And then
through the
they have a
30-minute video.
library of all the videos, kind of in the order that is recommended that you watch them, to step you through how to get up and running,
Yep.
right?
So you're right. There's a lot of resources available to us as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, everyone, I want to thank you. We're coming up here on an hour, and I want to make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. Again, if you have any questions, Kerrie, do you have a slide with your contact information that you could
Let's
bring up?
see. I
There we
have,
go.
yeah. So the easiest way to get a hold of me is to go to hoffmandigital.com. My contact information is on there. It's really easy even to set up an appointment and have a phone call. And there's also some other resources on there. There's a page on hoffmandigital.com. It's called Brilliant. It's called that because of the book that I wrote a chapter in, which is Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner. That's why it's called Brilliant. But on there is a giveaway. It's a free giveaway um, where you can get a little infographic on those 5 aspects of a digitally expanded mindset. And then there's 3 video clips as well that go into a little bit more detail on the digital flow framework. So
Yeah, and
that's
take
the
advantage
easiest
of
way
them.
to find it.
They're excellent resources.
Yeah,
So,
and you'll find all my social media too. So you can click on any of those and connect to me that way as well.
and I encourage you all to do so. Kerrie, I can't thank you enough for your insights today. As always, magnificent. We've had discussions on this before, but I'm always learning something new from you, and I really appreciate your time, as well as I'm sure everyone here on the webinar. And wish you all well, and let's charge forth with our digital transformations.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Marge. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kerrie. Take care. All have a wonderful afternoon.